I don't know why it's going up there though.
All right, everybody in the room and in the virtual world, we're going to go ahead and get started. The voice you're hearing for virtual is Eric Dundee, Executive Director. I'm going to go through the agenda quickly for us, and then we're going to get moving with some presentations, and then have time for question and answer at a few points in the presentations, and then also at the end. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started with a few updates from myself. Okay, so part of my updates today is just to recognize I've been in this position for about 8 months now, and through the commission and the process of my hiring, there were some commission goals for the district and the new executive director. So with that, we're just going to go through some of the highlights. For most of you here, there's been at least one touch point with me since I took this position. That's been one of the major things to stress, is not only for customer communities, but also Dane County Cities and Villages, Towns Association, be able to put a name with a face and then be able to talk about the issues and some of the concerns that we've had. So I do want to thank everybody who's actually reached out or taken the meeting requests for me. For that, I know there's even more coming, and as we move forward, there'll be constant communication. So thank you for that. The next thing we are going to talk about is organizational alignment for the district. So one of the first-year goals of the commission was to review the structure of the district and our staffing. That work is just finishing up. So we are going to present that at the commission tomorrow. So if you're interested in seeing what that looks like, you'll be able to hear more from Baker Tilley, who is our consultant who helped us from that work, and then for my steps from that report. Other things that we're going to talk about, of course, today and at other times, is budget improvements. So we've done a lot of outreach. For some people in this room, you've had either a conversation with myself or some other staff members here at the district. Our whole goal is to try to get to a better understanding of what the budget expectations are and what our process is, so there's an understanding for everybody there. We did have one-on-ones with that. We had focus groups. We've also done some work with the commission. We've created a finance committee for the commission. So with all the information that we get from customer communities and then us internally working on our finances, thought it was best to develop a finance committee. We actually have one finance committee member in the room, Dan Pultz. We have 2 others on that. They meet every other week. They're going through policies, get those updated. And one thing you'll hear more about today is we've already updated our reserves policy. So part of the work that we're doing in budgeting is understanding what we need for appropriate reserve levels. Also, as subcommittee work or committee work is executive director review process. So we've always had that committee in the last recently years, but we're going to go through a new process with a consultant to update the process of the review. We have multiple different pieces that get included in that, so we're going to hopefully be able to streamline that a little bit. Some other business work. So one of the things since I've taken this position is we've concentrated on some opportunities with property. So the district-owned property, what you see on the screen, is all in green plus the red. We have just worked with the commission, and we're going to purchase a small piece of property in yellow that you see on the screen. For those who know this area, there's commercial buildings and a restaurant building that became an opportunity for us. So we're going to take that and help our borders. What you see in red is a solar project. So we actually just had an open house last night with MG&E across the street from the maintenance facility. We're going to be working with them as partners to install about 37 acres of a solar array. That's going to offset about 40% of our energy demand. So the goal here is for us to provide an opportunity to produce clean energy, in our case for the finances, to get revenue because we are leasing this land to them, and hopefully in turn causing ratepayers for MG&E and the district to keep them as low as possible. And other updates, legislative updates. So this is one of the things in my new role that I had to learn. I don't want to use the words lobbying, but I had to learn how to talk to legislators, how to be part of that group. Well, the interesting part for me was we had something very, very important to talk about right away, which was the state revolving funds and the Clean Water Fund loans. So this is a picture of us at the state capitol with Senator Calderoy's from this area having that discussion. And that discussion was very important because she is part of the Joint Finance Committee. And recently, after those discussions, the Joint Finance Committee approved $725 million for the state revolving fund. That's for the whole state, you know, and why it's important for me to highlight that now is we as a district have a $100 million project coming up, our liquid processing phase 2 project. Just the ability to get clean water fund loans for that is approximately $1.5 to $2 million saved in interest payments. So think about those being in our service charges every year. Hopefully we're able to avoid those by getting the clean water fund loans for that. So with that, we also went to Washington, D.C., myself and Amanda Wegner here that you can see, and we talked with Senator Johnson and Baldwin's office, same topics, same support. So that's going to be a continued thing for us as the political winds change from here to there, and we keep making sure our funding is here. Other things to mention. So one thing I just want to make sure customer communities understand is we as a district are going through a sewer use ordinance update. So that update's led by staff that's here in the room and others. But what we want to do is communicate that there are changes that are coming. We will be doing a public hearing on that, which is required by law. Our goal is to get this updated. It hasn't been updated in a long time, and then have continual updates, 3-year basis like that. When we do the next one, not this one, but the next one, you're going to see even more significant changes. We know things are changing, so we want to get things updated now and then be able to have those discussions in the future. With that, I'll take any questions before I turn it over to Jen and Todd. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. And for those online and in person, we do have handouts. With no questions, Jen, Todd, come on up.
Good morning, everyone. I think we're still in morning. It's before noon, so. Todd Giebert, Capital Planning Manager, here to give an overview of the 2026 Capital Improvements Plan. In the first half, I'll be covering kind of what's driving our CIP, the process we use to select projects, what the 6-year spending looks like, mainly compared to last year's plan, new projects in the plan, and projects we removed. And then I'll turn it over to Jen, and she'll talk about some specific projects that are in the plan. So with that, this is my attempt to show all the assets that are applicable to our capital improvement plan, both in the collection system and at the treatment plant here. I know everyone's probably aware with our service area, but I'll just give a few quick facts. We serve about 180 square miles, 24 customer communities. We do that through about 100 miles of gravity interceptors and 50 miles of force mains. And here at the plant, you're familiar with the assets, but if we were to replace everything, we estimate it would be on the order of $1.5 billion to $2 billion. That's probably a conservative estimate. It's likely far more than that, just to give you a little sense of scale. And the problem is that some of these assets are getting really old. They're on the order of 100 years or more old. So while the systems function really well right now, we know that there's reinvestment that needs to occur, and that's a big feature of this plan. So this is what the plant looks like today. This is what it looked like 95 years ago when the first edition was constructed in 1934. And I like this picture for a few different reasons. Number one, it shows that there was a world that existed before Walmart existed. If you look at the upper right, there's nothing there. I like that. But more importantly, a lot of the infrastructure that you see here is still in service. The 4 circular tanks are just down the hill. They're serving as storage tanks and digesters. And then the long rectangular tanks behind that are actually our activated sludge system, which is a key feature of our liquid processing improvements plant or projects, which we'll talk a little bit more about. So the plant has 11 additions built over the decades, but they focus mainly on expansion for new growth and development, or they introduce new processes to meet regulatory requirements. Very few of those additions were done just to address aging infrastructure. So that's a key feature of our plan again. We're seeing the same kind of needs in the collection system. In the past year, we had a major repair that we had to do to one of our interceptors. This is located along the Military Ridge Bike Path out near Goose Lake in the town of Verona. We actually found a sinkhole that had developed over the sewer, and when we excavated, we found the picture on the left there, where actually it was corroding from the outside of the pipe in, introducing a lot of sand and gravel into the pipe, and if it let go, it would have actually collapsed the pipe. Luckily, we were able to repair it in time, but at considerable cost. This particular repair probably was going to end up costing about $1.5 million. So obviously, we like to get to these and fix them, rehab the sewers before they turn into something like this. So given that, the drivers in the plan, this looks at 6-year spending in the 2026 capital improvements plan by the primary drivers. Now, projects can have more than one driver, we understand that, but these are the primary drivers. So condition makes up about 72% of the spending we're projecting over the next 6 years, followed by capacity to support new development. This distribution is obviously not ideal. What we'd like to see is a little more dollars allocated to system resilience, providing things like redundancy in our system due to anticipated wet weather. But we're not able to get to those projects right now due to these other priorities. So now I'd like to switch gears a little bit and talk about how we actually introduce projects into the capital plan. So back in February, we had our preliminary project scoping meetings. This involves not only planning staff, but also staff from other groups such as engineering and operations and maintenance. So these are essentially brainstorming meetings where we look at all the needs and develop project ideas, I guess I'd call them. March and April then were spent preparing written business cases by staff and then presenting them to the planning team and developing a preliminary project list. Then in May and June, we put those scopes and schedules into our financial model and then produced the draft plan in July. Then along the way, we had several check-ins with our executive office, which consists of our executive director and our deputy executive director. So the meeting on May 21, we presented the preliminary project list. Then Eric also gave his priorities for the plan, what he considered to be the most pressing priorities. Second meeting was held on June 25th, and then we finalized that project list. And then a third meeting was held just a couple weeks ago to review the final product. So quite a bit of interaction with upper management on making sure we had the right priorities and the right alignment. So as far as how projects do get in the plan, facility planning is a key part of what we do. It's required for most of our projects by DNR, but we would probably do it anyway. It's just good planning. This step can take several months for a smaller project, but for a large project here at the plant, this could take a year or more, sometimes up to 2 years. So for the treatment plant, our most significant facility plan in recent memory is the liquid processing facilities plan. You're going to hear more about that in this presentation. It was completed in August of 2017, and it recommended 3 large projects that we're implementing. The first was completed in 2021, and we're doing the design right now for the second phase. On the collection system side, we have our collection system facility plan. This is done primarily in-house with in-house staff, and we do it every 10 to 15 years. That feeds most of the projects into the CIP on the collection system side. One thing that we introduced in this most recent update, which should be done next year, is a risk-based assessment for interceptors. In this, each of those dots represents basically sections of our interceptor system that have similar attributes. And then for those similar sections, we assign a condition score, which you see on the y-axis, which is based off our TV inspections of the sewer. And then the x-axis is the consequence of failure. For instance, is it located underneath a river or a busy highway, which would obviously give it a higher risk profile. So combining those two scores gives us a dot on the map there. And obviously we're trying to get and address those sewers with the highest risk before they get into that red zone. So of the 9 rehab projects in our CIP, most of them are starting to creep into that red zone. We have a similar risk assessment strategy for our pumping stations, but different criteria. Here we're mainly looking at the mechanical, electrical, structural systems at these stations, how they are set up for power redundancy, and also their capacity. This particular graph looks a little better for pump stations in that we have a fairly aggressive rehab schedule in the last 20 years, where every 2 to 3 years, we've rehabbed a station. So generally we have more in the green area for the pump stations, and we're in pretty good shape here. So looking at total 6-year expenditures, this compares the 2025 CIP and its 6-year planning window on the right to the proposed 2026 CIP. I guess the thing I'd note that is not a lot has changed between the two plans. The spending has increased about $18 million, and that's due mainly to that large project I keep referring to, the liquid processing. Most of the other plan is very comparable. The other thing you'll see here is that the fraction of projects in categories devoted to the plant has increased slightly from 61% to 64%, just due to that aging infrastructure that I referenced before. So there are some new projects in the 2026 CIP. The most notable is a project to remodel our laboratory. The lab does a lot of critical work at the plant. They produce samples and results that make sure we are complying with our permit, our water quality criteria. They also have samples that ensure we're operating the plant properly, and also the results are used for service charge billing to our customer communities. So that space is in need of some remodel right now. And that results in about $9.2 million in total project costs that we're adding. So to try to keep our resources in check, we also look for cuts in about the equivalent amount seen here. The most significant cut we made is a project to install, standby generators at our pumping stations. Right now, we have standby generation at only 5 of our stations of the 18 that we operate. This would have added and placed them at all the stations in the next 10 to 15 years. But we have redundant power at all those stations already. So this was not deemed a higher priority. We have obviously other condition-related needs that we want to address first. So with that, I will turn it over to Jen, and she'll talk about the projects, notable projects in the plan.
Thanks, Todd. I'm Jen Hurlbutz, Capital Planning Engineer. As Todd has mentioned, the largest portion that is driving our CIP is a couple of our treatment plant projects. Liquid processing improvements phase 2. If you followed the compliance maintenance annual reporting, or the CMAR, that was presented in June, we have been receiving a grade of B, which needs to be reported back to the Commission for influent BOD loadings that are exceeding 90% of the design capacity of the treatment plant. So this project is looking at that biological nutrient recovery system and to address that, to increase the ability of, or increase that available capacity for the design loads for reducing that nutrient loading. So that's the main driver for this project, and as Todd mentioned, the facility planning for this, was completed in 2017. So this has been a project that is been well under or planned for quite a while. So basically, the areas in red are what are being upgraded as part of this project. It's not really expanding. The design is able to do that without expanding extra primary tanks or a new plant expansion. So it's equipment replacement. What you're not seeing is all of the piping, electrical controls, blowers, all of that that's housed either underground or in those buildings near it. So essentially, the blower buildings, they blow the air into these tanks, provide the oxygen for the bugs to do their work, and reduce the nitrogen and phosphorus down to levels that can be safely returned to the environment. Also the equipment is 40 to 50 years old. As Todd said, most of the additions before have been for expansion or for new. So now this is kind of the start of those rehab, the replacement of the existing infrastructure. Over 500 assets will be replaced as part of this, but that creates an opportunity for us to replace the process with more efficient equipment, so we'll use less energy, and we'll also get more efficient treatment, like I said, without adding in more infrastructure. So we're currently in design, and the schedule is to bid in next summer, and construction should be fully underway in 2027. We anticipate the construction will be 2 to 3 years. So the other big treatment plant, biosolids infrastructure, we're in facility planning now. The Metro program has been in operation since 1979. So the biosolids are stored in the tanks that you see on the left. Until then, they can be loaded into the haulers out to the fields, and then it's liquid injection into the farm fields. So currently our biosolids are about 5% of total solids. So it's very much a liquid application. So part of the facility planning, some of the goals of this is to provide some improved flexibility with respect to biosolids disposal. So what we're running into is we've had weather changes with climate, and the fields have been more wet. A few years ago, we ran into an issue where it was too wet. We couldn't apply to the farm fields, and we were reaching or exceeding the storage capacity here at the plant. So in some ways, it'd be a technical problem. You think, okay, just increase storage. Well, there's uncertainty with PFAS, and the public perception, and, you know, do we still have more available farmland in order to apply this? So the facility plan is trying to really look at what are the options to increase flexibility for us in the future with the biosolids program. And that can be, you know, reducing solids content, maybe doing hybrid methods. But we have to keep in mind with some of that uncertainty with the emerging contaminants. So that facility plan is currently happening, probably carry into next year, and then we're showing design beginning in 2028. And construction would follow the completion of the liquid processing phase 2 project. So the third big kind of project at the treatment plant is it's in facility planning right now for heat and power. And the reason why we're doing facility planning for heat and power at the same time as biosolids is because they do have interrelation of or overlap of the systems. So we use biogas to generate about a third of electricity or heat and power at the plant. And that is done right now with the engine generators. Those were installed in the 1980s. They have been rebuilt several times and have just reached the end of their useful life. So they either need to be replaced and we continue doing what we're doing, or the other pathway that we're looking at is to clean up the biogas and sell it to a regional provider, similar in the way that Dane County Landfill is currently doing. So there's no infrastructure costs included in the CIP. We're still showing us developing as the facility plan is being worked on, and we're trying to determine which pathway will be the direction the district goes forward. The important for knowing at least which pathway is because that could impact the biosolids decisions too. So we're looking at both of those, understanding that they relate to each other. And when we've mentioned, you know, condition and that the liquid processing is really driving a huge chunk of that CIP, this graph really, I think, tells that story. So spending for just liquid processing 2 and biosolids is 44% of the total spending of the 6-year CIP. So outside of these projects, these 2 projects, we're looking at similar $20 to $30 million spending. So it's really that extra for the large treatment plant projects that is driving that increase in spending. So moving into interceptor projects. For capacity, we have over the last 15 to 20 years have been focused on other parts of the system, the Lower Badger Mill in the Verona area, West Interceptor along University Avenue, Northeast Interceptor, which obviously serves northeast or northwest region of Tawanakee and DeForest. So now we're shifting for the next 15 to 20 years to the Nine Springs Valley Interceptor. So this interceptor is running through the marsh, basically city of Fitchburg. So it starts at our just upstream of Pump Station 12, where the Verona Pump Station 17 force main discharges into, and then goes all the way down to our Pumping Station 11, east of Highway 14, and then that is directly pumped to the plant. So long stretch that will be completed over 20 years in 4 phases. We're currently working in design on phase 1 and 2 right now. So I think it's interesting to note what you can't see on this graph is the large area that is upstream of this. So this interceptor serves 84,000 people in our service area. So you're, you know, half of Middleton, city of Madison over by, you know, Elbow Park, that whole west side, Verona, and then the city of Fitchburg. So very important interceptor to get the wastewater here to the treatment plant. It was constructed in 1965 of reinforced concrete pipe. As what Todd had shown, We did have an emergency repair in that phase 2 stretch, so that project had moved up. So we're dealing with a lot of challenges, wetlands, access, easements, so we're currently in easements, looking at that for both of those projects. So moving into condition, the age of interceptor system, is, I think, a good indicator of, how the district grew over time. And so this just shows the lengths of miles of interceptors of when they were installed. The hatched is what portion of that length has now been rehabilitated since. And then your dotted line, or the more dashed line, is the cumulative length up to the total. And then your dashed dots is we started rehabilitating sewers in the 1990s. So, it took about 100 years to install, started rehabilitating. So we're looking at about 10% of the system that is currently being used has been rehabilitated. And so, we're looking at this going, okay, now we gotta keep making progress at this. So this plan has definitely tried to ramp that up. So for our interceptor condition projects, we have the purple ones I'm going to show up because I highlighted a little different. They are completing or have been completed or are soon to be completed this year for about 2% more of rehab length. And then the remaining 9, shown in yellow for the next 6 years, would get another 6% of the system rehabilitated. So total spending for those 9 projects in the plan is around $24 million. And then a couple of pump station and force main projects I wanted to highlight. Pumping station bar screens. So the picture is of the bar screen system that's in place at pumping station 18. So pumping station 18 was built in 2015 and had this designed in there. So below below the ground is the channel. So the gray, I guess like more vertical that you can see. So there's 2 channels, and then those have the screens inside. So it's basically like large screens or slots that are rotating, and will capture debris and then pull that up, and then it will be discharged into those. You can see it's nice little tube, or almost like garbage bags off the tubes into the dumpster. So it's taking out those large debris and solids and then putting them into those dumpsters so that they can be taken away. So what this does is it protects the pumps at the station, but it also protects the fine screens here at the plant. So there is not room to put in we call this more coarse screening in front of the fine screens at the plant. And so there's 5 influent pumping stations to the plant. So 18 is the one that already has this. The remaining 4, 2, 7, 8, and 11, this project will install the similar type of screening at those 4 stations. And so those 4 are just awarded and started design on these projects. And then force main condition assessment. So the 2 pictures on the left, in fall of 23, we had a force main break on pumping station 15 that runs along Allen Boulevard in Middleton. And so what you see on the left is where it was discovered, and there was water coming up out of the pavement and flowing down Allen Boulevard. After we dug and found what was going on, that's the middle picture there. It was a fairly 4-inch long by, I don't know, 1/2 inch maybe wide hole that had developed this ductile iron pipe, and the corrosion on that outside caused that hole to form, and we had a large force main leak from that. So we had identified 4 priority force mains in the facility plan to inspect as a or higher risk, and this is pump station 15, obviously, is one of them. And we are waiting, we plan to do the assessment on pump station 10 force main next year. So the pictures on the right are an example. This is the technology that is used to inspect. Because these have a metal component, you have a particular type of tool that is used to try to detect the wall thickness or wire breaks in a pre-stressed pipe. And the challenge with this is the inserting the tool, and it needs to basically be propelled through, so you have to keep it in service. But getting into the pipe and run that inspection through is quite a challenge. So we will, I want to note too, inspecting force mains is really new, and there's lots of different methods depending on what type of material and all of that. So it is not a simple routine type of an inspection like it is for our annual TV and cleave for gravity sewers. With that, we have a couple of minutes for questions on the CIP portion. Yes.
Excuse me, Bob. We have people online, and the only way they can hear your wonderful question is to speak in the mic.
Okay, thank you. So my question is on the assessments. When you do those and then you look back in time, how accurate are those assessments when you actually dig up the ground and do a project?
Are you talking for gravity force mains?
For any type of
interceptors,
for any type of infrastructure that you're doing assessments on, how accurate are they when you look back, when you actually do repairs on the different types of infrastructure?
Well, for our gravity interceptor example, we typically TV about every 10 years, or at least every 10 years. The one that we did see the failure on, there was a noticeable joint that had a little bit of an offset, but it seemed really stable. We had looked at, over many years. In that case, I think what happened was when we started cleaning it, because we were doing construction nearby, we pulled in, it was really soft, fine sands that kind of flowed in, and then we lost more of that structure and it started settling more. So again, just because you're taking a snapshot or an inspection, there are other things that can happen that can cause a failure that you can't see. And then when we did dig, right, we saw the outside of the pipe. There's really no way to assess that from the internal inspection. And same thing with like force mains and a risk. Well, we had an instance 20 years ago where contractor drilled into the pipe. That's there's other factors besides just the condition of the pipe, right, that can cause a failure. So it's the best available information that we have at the time, and then using what we can to try to balance and then compare to others to come up with that prioritizing ranking, and then bring in the consequence of failure that well, it's in the middle of the belt line versus somewhere out in a farm field. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Able to ask a question?
Going back to the assessment report that you have with the green, the yellow, and the orange. So when you do interceptors on the interceptor one, I noticed like the Nice Springs Valley interceptor was broken down to 4 or 5 different phases. Is each one of those phases accounted for, or do you just do one assessment for the whole line?
It depends. So what the groupings typically, sorry, I should repeat the question for the people online. You've got the microphone, perfect. Sorry. So in general, the dot would represent a pipe that was, say, the same year, material, So, you know, the Nine Springs Valley Interceptor System was, if it, you know, was constructed all in the same year, then it would have been treated probably all the same, and it hadn't been rehabilitated. So sometimes too, right, we'll have a section that may have been rehabilitated, then that would chunk out and become its own assessment. Does that answer the question? Okay.
Forbes, I believe you had a question online.
Yeah, I know the presentations have identified many project needs, especially in the area of equipment and capital investment. Has MSD staff or the commission created a document kind of prioritizing all the project needs outlined today? And would it also be able to identify when each project must start by, or are they all these just projects that need to start by 2026?
Okay. The answer is that, you know, the schedule is presented in the CIP, and that would, in general, I guess, you know, show the results of that prioritization.
Got it. Thank you.
Is there anyone else online that has a question?
There's time to ask questions at the end, so we are going to go on to budget. I'm Bill Walker, Deputy Executive Director. Some of you may have expected to see Ben Narad, former budget officer. He has moved on to bigger and better things at the University of Wisconsin. So I am pinch hitting a little bit of a way to lower expectations. I took a guess at what people would be interested in hearing about today. This is what I think people want answers to. Number one, what will my community service charges be? We'll get that answer in mid-September. We need to complete our flow and loading projection for 2026 and then take the final budget, or not the final, the budget as we introduce it. We'll send letters to communities as we've done before. So I can't answer that one today, but I will be able to answer sort of overall for the district service charges. I'm assuming people are interested in hearing a little bit about the overall drivers. The CIP is the big one. You've already heard about that, but I'll say some more. I won't do full details because I want to give the commission the chance to hear that first. I want to say a little bit more. You heard some of this from Todd, but how decisions are made on the budget. I have gotten the impression from various meetings with people that there's a little bit of a question there. So I want to say some about our decision-making process. This is a question I assume none of you had, but I think you should have it, and I'm going to give it to you and answer it, which is, what if we changed in how we manage reserves? And then we'll wrap up with a little bit of forecast for future years and next steps. So, bottom line, up front, total 2026 service charges. So actually, before I get to this, I got to caveat the heck out of this thing. I am going to talk about what I think we will introduce as the budget in September to the Commission. It is possible a few things will still change. We actually had a capital project cost estimate change last week or the week before. I don't expect many, but it's possible. I also want to repeat the point I just made. I am talking here today about the overall budget. Impacts on individual communities will be different than what I'm showing today, because every community is different flows and loadings, different industrial base, and so on. So I'm giving you the overall district picture. We expect with capital spending, that's what's operating budget, that in order to balance the budget in 2026, we will need to collect $1.5 million. Compared to 2025, get your pens ready, that is an additional $2.89 million, which is a 4.9% increase. On a household basis, which I find is good context, that is an additional $14 for the average household over the entire year. Now, we got to caveat that a little bit. We don't bill households, you do. There are a lot of different households with different water use and so on. We make our best estimate of what our charges will be on an average household basis, and that's what this number is. That would lead to an estimated for average household $295 per year. I will pause and drink water while you write. So that's the bottom line, 4.9%, $14 per household is what we're expecting to introduce. A little bit about drivers. On, I said the CIP is a driver. On the operating side, a theme Eric and I want everyone to be aware of is that we put a lot of attention this year on cost to continue. One of Eric's first instructions to directors was, tell me what you actually need to keep running. And we focused, we as directors focused on those things just to illustrate what that means. You got to pay your electric bill, you got to buy gas, you got to buy chemicals, those sorts of things. General inflationary increases, software license costs more, that data set costs more, those sorts of things. We tried to limit, well, I in particular tried to limit that category to people. What do you actually need to increase? Another major theme is staffing and positions. Of course, we try to adjust our wage schedule to keep up with the market. There will be an element there for that. Eric has identified 3 frontline positions that he'll be introducing. One for automated systems work, because we have, particularly with liquid processing, a lot more complicated monitoring technology coming on. We have security concerns about the plant's operations network, and some support there will be needed. A position to help with asset information. That's one of those positions that makes everybody else more efficient. If you have good assets, information management helps people plan better. And then a communications position. We have, I think you do as well, but we have a lot of communications needs. And it's not just big events like this. It's every public meeting for an engineering project. We want to get additional communications help with that. So for instance, our project engineers are not having to spend their time preparing for a meeting. Eric's already talked about organizational alignment. This will manifest itself in the budget in terms of some leadership positions. That'll be introduced to the commission tomorrow. And then this last item is really kind of an inflationary one, but I do pull it out. Maintenance, equipment, parts, repairs. Eric and others like to talk about the district mission as being collecting, treating, and returning water. I like to think of the district's mission as maintaining infrastructure. I'm always promoting the fact that most of what we do here is maintenance. That's expensive, and we put a lot of effort into making sure that is supported well. Here, I'm not talking about the big capital projects. I'm talking about the day-to-day stuff of the maintenance departments. Decisions. I'm going to repeat a little bit of what Todd covered. Our decisions, so for context, the biggest part of our planning is in the CIP, 6-year plan. As Todd indicated, that plan is about knowing what your projects are. Do all that business case work early in the year to make sure, even for existing projects, got the scope right. We adjust the schedule. We're sure what the most current budget is. We put a lot of effort into getting our projects nailed down. We put a lot of effort into figuring out how we're going to staff these things. We have a project engineer who can lead that. They can't do it this year. They're going to do it next year. Are we able to absorb this work given the burden that it puts on, say, the operations staff? Like I said, we put a lot of effort into putting this schedule together, trying to be realistic about what we can actually get done. The big one for me is cash flow. We're going to have a lot of spending. Are we going to have money on hand in a given year when we need it? Are we going to be able to maintain reserves, which I'll talk about in a minute? And of course, the big part of cash flow is knowing what you're going to have to borrow for. Clean Water Fund cover it? Are you going to have to do geo bonding? And what is that going to imply for debt service? And are you going to be able to pay for that? That is the 6-year plan, and I put plan in bold. This may be a point that only matters to me, but that is not a budget. That is a plan. CIP is not controlling, and you'll see that language, and we'll talk about it when we talk to the commission. It is helping us get ahead of the future and figure out what we need. The budget is a 1-year document which sets limits. It is a spending control document. We say, or the commission says, ultimately, You can spend this much in the operating budget for 1 year, this much in the capital budget. We don't really put a limit on debt because we're going to pay our debt, but the budget tells us what it's going to be. 6-year plan, 1-year budget. Decision process. Todd already talked a little bit about this. We start with capital project business cases. And then the operating, I have no idea why that word request is down there. Okay, you can cope. Operating budget starts in early summer, and this is a director-led activity. Eric gives instructions to us on what we should be working in, limits, and the directors take a look at their programs. Are there new, say, regulations or requirements they're facing? What are their costs to continue information? Are there project or positions that they think they need? And then in the summer is when Eric gets most actively involved. He met with every single director and reviewed their budget, made decisions on what they were going to put in. As Todd indicated, he went through the entire capital improvements plan. Now, Todd listed 3 meetings. There were a lot more than that. Sort of off to the side meetings, reviews of projects, reviews of schedules. Like I said, he did operating budget requests and position needs. So I put executive director reviews and adjusts in bold because I get the impression that there have been some questions about this. This is a little bit of a change from the past. All I will say is this is Eric's budget, and he reviewed every part of it and made the decisions. Now, the commission has a role here, which looks like it starts in September or October, but that's misleading because we have made a real effort to involve the commission the whole way along. We gave a preview in May of sort of the major priorities for the budget, got some feedback and discussion there. We introduced those frontline positions in July. Had a capital improvements plan presentation, very similar to one you just got, also in July. And then tomorrow we're going to talk about organizational alignment. Our goal here is to make sure that when the budget shows up on the 11th, we're not leaving any surprises for anybody, and we've gotten feedback from the commission. All right, the question you did not know you had. What have we changed about reserves management? On July 17th, the commission adopted a new reserves policy. And we do have to thank the Finance Committee for this. This policy has been something that has been important to me and the team. It was important to the Finance Committee, and they put a lot of effort into revising our ideas and making them better. The issue was our previous reserves policy, which determines how, well, I'll get to what it is, was not clear enough. And in particular, although it said what your minimum needs to be in each fund, it did not set maximums in 2 of our funds. It set a maximum in the operating fund, and that was great, and we didn't really have to make any changes. But it put no limits on how much we could hold in reserves in the capital fund or the debt fund. And this is an issue some of you have been concerned about because it leaves open the possibility that we're collecting and holding more money than we need, and that's not good. So the new policy sets allowable ranges for reserves, sort of high-low. In the operating fund, for instance, it's between 180 days and 210 days equivalent spending. Capital fund is more complicated because that's a more complicated fund. It also adds instructions on what to do if you miss. Get through the end of the year, you look at your closing balance. Well, turns out you had too little in reserves. What do? I'm glossing over a whole bunch of procedure here, but the summary of it is you fix that right away in your next budget. This is important because this now tells us as staff, it tells the commission what amount of money do you need to have and make sure that you have it. All right, a little bit about future years. You've already heard some of this story. We have a lot of spending starting after 2027, and I'm going to repeat 2 of the projects Jen listed, liquid processing and biosolids. I'm also going to make a point that I don't think Todd said, but he said to me before. There are about 50 other projects in our CIP. That's a normal CIP. And we added on top of that 2 major projects. This is a big spending period we're looking at, driven by those 2 projects. I want to highlight this. We are going to be, I'm almost certain, going to be using some general obligation bonding for some collection system projects. And I mention it because I'm sure some of you know that there has been concern that the Clean Water Fund program would not be able to support even normal projects. through a lot of efforts of a lot of people, including Eric, League of Municipalities, and so on, the new biennial budget, state biennial budget, has the requested amount of revenue bonding. So that program is healthy. But even with that, there's still some prioritization that the DNR does. Some of our collection system projects we know are going to score low, and we still need to finance them. So we're probably going to see some general obligation bonding. I talked about reserves already, but I want to highlight this if you dig into our financials, especially for the capital funds. In the out years of the plan, we're letting those reserves drop the low end of the range because we're using those reserves sort of on a temporary basis in the plan to offset some of that higher spending. We're expecting that high period, those two projects will be relatively temporary, and we can build back up. That's one of the things you can do with a good reserves policy. So you'll see those reserves getting low in the later years of the plan. Every forecast has uncertainties. I want to highlight two. One of them is we haven't bid liquid processing. I know I'm not an engineer, I'm a money person, but I listen to engineers talk, and they're nervous about that bid. It could be higher than what we're planning for. The other thing that can always happen is you can have schedules disrupted. Now, I do want to emphasize, we spent a lot of time, Jen and I, pushing Eric in particular. Are we actually going to get that project done in 29? I don't think so. Look, it's got a lot of property requirements, or it requires cooperation with some community. That's probably going to take a little bit longer. We pushed those schedules to be as realistic as we could, but with projects this big and this long, there may be some slippage. Forecasting service charges. So in 2025, our budget was $59 million. As I said, 26, we expect a budget for about $62 million, and then growth over the period. That dotted orange line at the top it's a hypothetical scenario for what if we had to absorb an additional $20 million, say. Liquid processing came in that much higher, just to illustrate sort of the range. And the lower orange dot is the mirror image of that, $20 million lower over the period. Say a bunch of projects go slower than we thought. Give you a sense of the range in dollar terms. In percentage terms, 4 points, whatever I said it was, 9% in 2026. We are expecting to have higher growth rates in the future in order to get through this period of spending. And again, those two ranges. So if we get surprised with an expensive bid, we're going to have to, and we didn't change anything else, which will be part of the discussion, believe me, if we do get a high bid. But if we had to absorb it as is, that's what it would look like. And then again, if we find we're spending $20 million less over the period, lower growth rates. So that's forecast. Bottom line, 4.9 in 2026, it's about $14 per household, and we are planning ahead for higher spending. Next steps. We're introducing the budget to the Commission in full detail on the 11th. There's a public hearing on the 25th. Written comments due on the 10th at 4 o'clock. You can, of course, come to the hearing and give comments in person. Then deliberation by the Commission on the 16th and adoption on the 30th, at which point we'll finish service charge rates and get the final communities. I guess that was the last slide, which really means questions on anything. Eric, any of the stuff that you've heard today, we'd love to take them. But don't feel obligated to ask if you don't want to. Ezra, go ahead.
You know, I like the idea of draining down some of your funds to use them for capital projects, but have you analyzed what impact that might have on like a bond rating and how that might impact your ability to borrow at lower rates going forward?
Yeah, this is a great question. Bond rating. So we have not issued GO bonds since the early 80s. We do not have a bond rating right now, but we are working with PFM, a municipal advisor who serves a lot of communities in Wisconsin and nationally. And we talked with them about this question, what will be the determinants of our bond rating? And yes, reserves are part of it, but their advice to us has been, your reserves are just fine. The key thing that ratings agencies are going to look at for you is the fact that you have the power to levy a property tax, which we don't do, to be very clear. We have no plans to do so. But in terms of a rating, that's the factor that really matters, and there isn't a concern that we're aware of now from those reserves. Now, when we do go out as part of our first issue and get an actual rating, we'll have learned something at that point, and we may need to make adjustments. There is a provision in the Commission's reserve policy for, in the event that additional reserves would benefit our rating, they can set a ratings target, and then we can add reserves for that if we need to. Was there a question online? Lytle? Commissioner Meyer, go ahead. I can't see who,
Yeah.
I'm just hearing people whisper at me.
No, thanks, Bill. This is Commissioner Ezra Meyer. I just wanted to ask because I know it's been it's of importance to folks from the customer communities. Isn't there a step in the process where we share out at least an estimate early of what their individual community service charge increases might look like for the year ahead? If it's still true, I know we were doing that, but if it's still true, I figured that's worth highlighting a little bit because it gets people a bit of a earlier than late October sense of where we're going to be for their budget planning.
Yes, there is, and I raced past that at the beginning. We'll send a letter to communities individually in mid-September with individual flow and loading projections and rate and charges projections for next year.
Thanks, Bill.
When you look at your capital expenditures, what percentage is paid by cash on hand versus borrowed dollars?
Varies by year. In the high spending, I'm going to talk and then Tyler correct me if I'm wrong. In the higher spending years, we are roughly 80% debt funded. We can't get to 100 because a bunch of our projects are not eligible for Clean Water Fund loans, and it would be a GO bond for those if you don't have to. The Commission has a policy on borrowing, which is basically use the Clean Water Fund where you can. So that's what we do.
I'll go ahead, Al.
Just briefly, we like to message this to some of our customers and give them notice of increases and things like that. Do you have things that your communications people can help us with, whether it's in the form of social media type things or billing stuffers that can really take a deeper dive into explaining some of the increases?
So our communications and public affairs director is not here, so I'm answering for her a little bit. But we have talked a lot about this, and she and I have met with several communities to sort of get input on that. So yes, in general, we will work together to provide some kind of information. We've been trying to simplify our budget document also towards that end, so it's more legible to people and they can get the key stuff that they need. But we're glad to have any input on what would actually be useful for people, and we'll do our best to provide things that are helpful.
Bill, isn't it correct that for CIP we actually have to cash flow it before we can debt it?
Yes. So for any project that is financed with the Clean Water Fund program, that is a reimbursement program. So we get borrowing approval from the DNR in advance, and then we spend money on the project, and then we submit reimbursement requests. One of the reasons to maintain reserves and one of the factors in the levels is to be sure that we're able to do that we can pay the bills for a project while we're waiting for Clean Water Fund reimbursement. As any of you who do general obligation bonding know, the other way around for GO bonds, you issue the bond and you got the money right now. So then, in a sense, you have the opposite problem. You don't want to get the money too early before you're doing your project. But yes, cash flow management, big deal.
I don't really have a question. That's more of a statement, and I want to thank you for clearing this up. This is probably the most clear I've ever come out of one of these meetings in my many years of being here. So it's been very refreshing that there's some transparency, openness that is afforded us community. So thanks.
I can be the auctioneer, going once, going twice. Okay, with that, we'll do the closing. So for me, I just want to thank everybody for being here, online and in person. Also, the door is open, and please send me requests or anybody on staff if you want us to come to your communities or come do any kind of presentations. As our friends in Wanakee said, we do want to work on some sort of communication that can be used. So we'll be looking at that later. So thank you, everybody.